There's been a lot of focus on concentration in a few industries in Canada and on our country's rules around competition. So here's what you need to know. That there is concentration isn't really in dispute. Head to the grocery store. Three big companies dominate 60% of the sector: Loblaw, Metro, and Empire, though each have offshoot brands that may appear independent. No Frills, Food Basics, and Freshco are all owned by the dominant players. It's also true in telecom, where three main firms, Bell, Rogers, and TELUS, control the market. They also have offshoot brands, names like Koodo, Fido, or Virgin Plus. For airlines, there are two major players. Air Canada and WestJet share 80% of our market. When companies merge, they use the efficiencies defense to pass the competition hurdle. Basically, it means if they can show cost savings, the merger is probably a good thing. But changes to the Competition Act add some new standards for business, including prohibiting so-called drip pricing, where the price offered isn't really attainable thanks to hidden fees or add-ons. And it adds nuance to what affects competition in a market, adding barriers to entry or network effects, entrenching a dominant position, price and non-price competition, and innovation in that market. It also vastly increased the fines payable, including a potential maximum fine for competition offenses valued at 3% of the company's annual global sales. So how much will those changes in Canada's Competition Act improve the landscape, and what more, if anything, remains to be done? Matthew Boswell is Canada's Commissioner of Competition. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Amanda. It's great to be here.
Well, I did want to start there because I know that you have views about what can change, and we do have these proposed changes that will be implemented. Is it enough, or how much more do we have to do?
So we did have changes last summer to the Competition Act, and they were described by the Minister of Industry as an initial down payment on changes to our law that, in my opinion, are long overdue. So we're in the middle of a government consultation right now on additional changes to the law.
And when we generally think about Canada's competition landscape, I think we have a sense that we're more concentrated than other countries, and we have all kinds of reasons for why that is. But we can name industry after industry where it's the case. Is that a fair characterization, that we're kind of overly concentrated?
I think so. I think we're at an important moment in Canada where there's widespread realization that Canada needs more competition. Last summer, there was a poll where 88% of Canadians felt that way. And if you look at our markets, if you look at economic indicators, that would support that we need more competition in this country, more competition to drive productivity growth. We're lagging there. To drive innovation, to drive lower prices, affordability for average Canadians, better choice, better service. There are so many things, positive things that would come with more competition in this country.
Of course, one of the really kind of sleepy ways that we can impede competition and therefore innovation and new products and services is by regulation. How big an issue is that in this market? How would you like to confront that issue?
Amanda, it is a huge issue in Canada. We have a real problem with regulations that hinder competition. If you look at in 2018, the OECD published what's called a product market regulation indicator assessment for all OECD countries, and Canada was second last in terms of regulations that hinder competition. And this is at all levels of government in this country. We would really benefit from a whole of government approach to analyze our regulations, our laws, and determine what regulations are unnecessary or unnecessarily hinder competition to open up our markets. And by doing so, we would see, I believe, a dramatic increase in GDP and a much more competitive environment for the benefit of consumers today, Canadians today, but our long-term economic prosperity. It's a very, very important issue that the Competition Bureau has been talking about for some time now. And we've seen other countries tackle this head on. It's going on right now in the United States with President Biden's whole of government approach to increasing competition in their economy. And we saw it in Australia in the 90s into the early 2000s, where as a result of all the work they did to address competition issues, they saw a 2.5% increase in their GDP, which translated to thousands of dollars per household in their economy.
Which sort of raises the question, it's kind of a tantalizing one, of who would be against this. You are the first, I think, and most vocal commissioner of competition on these subjects, at least in maybe in sort of just wider circles, but certainly that's been public about the need for change. But why wouldn't politicians of all stripes embrace this idea? It's a very kitchen table kind of an issue. People would get better and cheaper products and services. Why would anybody hesitate to make these changes?
Well, as you can see, the current government has already taken steps to address deficiencies in the Competition Act. They've taken steps to bolster the Competition Bureau by increasing our budget, which was stagnant for literally over a decade, to allow us to do more to advance competition in Canada. And the government's engaged in this complete, comprehensive examination of the Act, which, of course, from my perspective, I applaud that. And I hope that the ongoing consultations see lots of Canadians from diverse backgrounds put forward their views on competition. Competition fundamentally matters to every single Canadian every day when they leave their house or their apartment. Competition is the best protection the public has. And it is indisputably a key pillar of a capitalist society. As President Biden has said frequently, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. So there should be widespread demand for reform, both of the Competition Act and for looking at the many ways we can make our economy more competitive.
One of the really interesting, you might even venture to say ironic things about this whole story is that this sort of efficiencies argument gets at cost savings. If companies can show that there are cost savings to be had, then that'll ultimately be good for everyone. I would kind of turn that on its head and say, when we talk about the grocers, which you've now undertaken a market study of, the banks, our telecom market, we think we can point to higher prices than other markets pay. Is that alone evidence of a lack of competition, or should it at least be smoke that we should investigate for fire?
I think the latter, Amanda. I mean, to determine if a market or markets are competitive, you have to look at the evidence. And that's what the Bureau does. We dig down on the evidence and make determinations based on that. And of course, when you have markets with high levels of concentration, significant barriers to entry, a lack of disruptive competitors, then you can get to the conclusion that there's a competition problem, that there isn't sufficient competition in that market. And that's the work that the Bureau does day in and day out with a view to protecting and promoting competition in Canada.
All right, Matthew, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're talking to Canada's Commissioner of Competition. The Act is undergoing some changes. What might those changes look like? That's next.